red blues. Red blues, baby, red blues. Every kind of people got every kind of blues, but a red man's got red blues. Go to work every day for that minimum wage. There's a guy, blonde hair, blue eyes, just about your age. Has it working that is half as long as you. He makes twice as much money as you do. Red blues, red blues, red blues, baby, red blues. Every kind of people got every kind of blues, but a red man's got red blues. After work, I go home, make myself a drink, grab a glass, a few ice cubes, walk on over to the sink. My old lady says that I ought not to. You'll get sick if you drink that water. Red blues, red blues, red blues, baby, red blues.
So there you go. It is December 4th, Monday. I want to welcome you to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people. We look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation and simulcast and rebroadcast on the Gwe, CKWE in Tandanega. You can find us at www.ltnradionet.com. And, of course, we're streaming live, as we do with all of our shows. We are streaming live on Facebook. So if you want to share the show, I'd greatly appreciate it. It's always great to get our views up and get people interacting. The great thing about doing Facebook Live is that I can see your comments and in real time. Although I usually check up on the breaks with them, so I can respond to them either on air or otherwise. Hey, look, I'm John Kane. I am your show's host and producer, and I've got Jake Proud in studio, who is manning our board and our cameras for both the Facebook live stream and for capturing the video for our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. That's the channel. If you'd like, you can subscribe to that channel as well, and you'll get notifications for shows that we post up on YouTube, as well as any other videos that we post up. So I encourage you to do so. Our studio engineer is Callie McMillan, and I want to thank her for the fine work she did in putting our setup together. And, of course, our opening song was Res Blues by the incomparable Murray Porter. And, of course, we're always feeling a little bit of that. But, it's one of those things when you think about how fashionable being Native can be. And of course, I'm not just talking about Elizabeth Warren claiming to be Cherokee. Or there's a lot of people who now, and I would say more recently, and perhaps even coming out of the free love 60s and that kind of stuff, where being Native was fashionable. It wasn't so fashionable before that. I mean, it really wasn't. And so the whole idea that that we are well, I guess fashionable is the best word. I mean, that people don't mind claiming to be Native. The problem with that is there's a little bit of a false claim that can go associated with that as well. But I mean, I wouldn't choose to be anybody else. And identity is something that we talk a lot about on this program. And one of the things I want to talk about today is less about identity, although it can shape identity, it can shape individual identity. I want to talk about education. I want to talk about why get educated. Yeah, and what is education? Is it just formal education? Is it higher learning? Is it high school, trade school? Is it university? Is it I don't know, the monastery or the military? I mean, where do you choose to get your education, and what are you getting it for? So that's I want to talk about that. I want to break it down a little bit, because I think we get advised, and we get counseled, and we get encouraged sometimes by parents or people who see an aptitude in us, or a talent or a skill set, and oftentimes somebody else can decide for you what you should pursue for education, and again, why. So I broke it down. What are the purposes for education? And of course, the immediate thing that people think of is well, I'm going to get an education so I can get a good job. It's a funny thing, when I first graduated from high school, and again, in a very assimilated style of education, standard high school education, with guidance counselors and people who thought you should had opinions about what you should pursue for education and career. The automatic assumption was to go to college, and I was a good student in high school, and the assumption was that I was going to go study engineering, or some tech field, some STEM field, so to speak. And of course, on the flip side, I did a lot of theater, including some summer stock. So there were many people who thought I was going to pursue an arts education as well. And and this is kind of this ends up being the challenge. I mean, even though I was advised, by guidance counselors and others to pursue education for a career, I was told by some very good friends and close friends and people who were more in the into the arts, who said the reason for going to university isn't for a job. The reason for going to university and to pursue education, pursue higher education, as they put it, was to be a more complete person, and to be more fulfilling, and to be more, broadening your horizons. So, I mean, when you think about it, there are these choices you can make about what you're going to pursue in terms of education. Are you going to pursue education specifically because you have an area, a career that you're pursuing? You're going to go to med school because you want to be a doctor. You're going to go to engineering school because you want to be an engineer, or whatever. You study journalism because that's what you. I mean, or do you do these things, or do you do a variety of these things so you can have a sampling of what some of these fields are and that kind of stuff? So, I mean, again, is career the reason for education? I mean, is career and a living the reason for education, or is wisdom? There's probably a lot of very wise poor people, I guess, but so do you pursue knowledge and wisdom with your education? And I'm not talking necessarily about universities or college education. Of course, the other reason for pursuing education is security. Both personal security. I mean, you should know the world around you. You should know what's happening in the world. You should know, you should know some of the things that that place you at risk. And of course, in learning some of those things, you may find things that you may be able to do to mitigate some of that risk, or maybe you'll find that there's nothing you can do. I mean, a good friend of mine, Paul Degarundige, who joins me on the program quite often. Every time we get into one of these bigger conversations about Russia or Iran, or even South America, even other indigenous peoples, one of the things that Dega always told me, he says, you can be consumed with all of these problems, but what can you do about them? So should you dial back a little bit and look at the circumstances, the situations that you can do something about? And are those the areas that of concentration? I mean, should we concentrate more on the issues that we can effect. So, when you spend the time to, to pursue learning about, Russia or, or Germany or Africa, are you learning about the problems and the relationships because you want to affect those, or just because you're trying to broaden your horizon? So, I think that's part of the conversation. So I want to talk about the idea of becoming, of gaining education, of gaining knowledge for security, for self-improvement, and for survivability. And survivability is career and living and, and sustainability, all of that stuff. So that's what I'd like to have a bit of a conversation about. I'd like to talk more about what that looks like and what education could be or should be. So let's talk. Let's start with security. I think there's a logical and a perfectly good reason for learning about the world. So and I say this because we have this conversation sometimes where we're challenged and we say, you're getting educated in the ways of the white man. Well, I think there's a value in understanding who both our friends and our foes are, and understanding their history, their culture, even their religion. And I say that not because I want to become indoctrinated and to become that, but to be aware of it. And I think that's the whole idea of trying to become, I guess, just become aware. And aware and I call it security because I think that's part of the issue. I think part of the issue is that we do have to understand that there are dangers, and the world has world history. I mean, whether you're talking about the potential for nuclear holocaust or for for economic chaos, for social unrest. These are the things that I think we should understand what's happening in the world, so we can have a better idea of just what are the risks out there. And so I say this not because I think the world is necessarily heading into Armageddon, but there is a chance of that. I was listening to a program on the way here. There is nothing that we are facing that we can't either mitigate in some way, even climate change. I mean, I'm not saying we can stop climate change, but we can certainly become a little bit more skilled in understanding how we deal with climate change, how we deal with some of the threats that are out there. So, and the same thing could be said about whether it's global conflict. The world doesn't have to kill each other. Countries don't have to kill each other. The United States and Korea don't have to be heading straight into a nuclear conflict. So I mean, these all of these things that happen in the world, none of them have to happen. There are choices being made. So again, getting back to my friend Dego, what do we do with the decisions that we make and the choices we make that enable us to have better make better choices that will secure us better, that will do more to protect us, not only in this life, but we talk about 7 generations. I'm wearing my 7 shirt, by the way, even though it's a Colin Kaepernick shirt. One of you guys commented, "Is that 7 generations?" Well, it's got the fist and the power and the 7. So I guess it could go that way. And that's the reason for education. The reason for pursuing an education is to secure your future. I'm not talking about money here. I'm talking about being educated about what's happening in the world, so we don't make those same mistakes, and whether we can effectively change the decisions that other people make. That may or may not be the case, but we certainly can create a different path. And so I think part of the reason for understanding the ways of, again, of our, whether you want to call them our enemies or our allies. I mean, I think we should know, know their politics. We should know how their government works and how it really works, not just, listening to, Schoolhouse Rock and I'm Only a Bill. I mean, understanding what lobbying is, understanding, what is collusion and what isn't collusion. I mean, we could argue, maybe it's inappropriate for another country to make campaign contributions in the U.S. political systems, but Native people do it all the time. Why isn't that regarded as some sort of a campaign violation, or collusion, I guess. So I mean, it's not just about what is their system, does it prohibit something, but should we not be doing something anyway? I mean, so understanding how their system works. I mean, and again, the flaws of it all, whether it, does it work? Does their justice system work? I mean, understanding how it works and how it's supposed to work is one thing, but making an evaluation on whether it works. This is all education, folks. I mean, I'm not saying that you're going to, take, courses on this stuff. And there's any number of ways, and we'll talk about that a little bit as the show goes on. How do you educate yourself? And I think that's got to be part of the question. I think we do have to ask some of these things. So when I say let's learn about their courts and their politics and their governance, let's learn about their history, and not just the history they say, but the history that's real, and not just the history that necessarily involves us. Perhaps the history that involves other people's. The way to learn from past mistakes is to first acknowledge them. So their history, understanding their culture. Do they have a culture? Do the people that we find ourselves impacted by, is their culture deep? Is it entrenched? Is it locked into something that changing the culture is becomes such a challenge that it almost seems what do they call it? Indivisible or inherent. It isn't, but does it have that appearance of that? Understanding the language. Look, I have the English language mastered as well as most people. I think I use good grammar. I know big words, but more than that, I can communicate in the language and I can understand what I'm reading. And I'm one of those guys that'll read legal documents, and as painful and dry as they are, getting through reading a contract or reading some of the research papers that are done. Man, some of that stuff's tough to read, but I have enough command of the language that I can get through the boring, or the repetitive, or the overly worded text of what I'm reading to be able to pull out the interesting tidbits out of it, and so I think understanding that language and perhaps other languages. I'm going to get into our own language in another section here, but understanding that language and that culture, understanding things like medicine and their sciences, not just our science and not just science in general, because it's fine to talk about science as just matters of fact, but there's scientific pursuits. One of the issues that we talk about all the time is we talk about food, and Monsanto and genetically modified organisms and all that other stuff. My biggest concern is not necessarily that, that agribusiness has been taken over by these people who fund all this research to, perhaps make, supposedly to make food more durable and, drought resistant or insect resistant or, weed resistant, all the chemical resistance, all of that stuff. And that sounds good. I mean, for the most part. The problem is you've turned farming into something that is controlled by a small group of people. So understanding science and understanding the business of science and the science of business, that I think is, again, part of that education that we should be, somebody should pursue it. and again, as I talk about some of this stuff, I'm not saying everybody needs to pursue every avenue of education, but I think understanding and for us as Native people to have an understanding, or at least have people in our community who do have an understanding, you know, of what all this stuff means. You know, what does, you know, what is the real impact of a Monsanto? What is the real impact of small farms going out of business and food being only run by these, you know, these multinational corporations? I mean, is the impact just quality of food, or is it food security? Is it food sovereignty? I mean, is that another issue? So, and again, this is part of the reason, again, from a security standpoint, why education just on the, you know, to become more secure in your understanding of the world and your place in it. I think that's a reason to pursue education. Now, what does that mean to pursue education? Does it just mean to go to college and you know, run through that assimilation process, that process? I mean, you know, I've said it before on the show many times. I've listened to university after university after university as they put their advertisements out for you know, especially for recruitment of students. And one of the most common ads you'll hear, or the common things you'll say is, "We are preparing our young people for the global economy." And I think that is a terrible pitch. I think it's terrible that that we are looking at universities as the pathway to perpetuate what I think is, you know, one of the biggest lies told to people, which is this notion of a global economy. Economies are local, and the fact that we have this thing called a global economy, it has to do with concentration of wealth and concentration of the few people who can control local economies, and control at different levels, because there's the economy of manufacturing and job creation, and then there's the economy of consumerism and you know, and capitalism in that, on the both ends of that thing. So I think we have to look at universities not just as the vehicle so we can learn how to do business in China, or how not to have to do business in China. These are the challenges, and I think these challenges are why we have to look beyond beyond universities, or at alternatives to universities. You know, obviously one of the ways to pursue education is just to do your own research, and you know, we live in an information age where there's so much available online, and you know, whether it's you know, books to read, videos to watch, you know, reports to, you know, to peruse, all of this stuff. You can learn a lot of things on the internet if you know what to look for, and if you're interested in pursuing a certain direction. And you know, and we can talk about everything from, you know, gardening to home building to, you know, auto repair. I mean, anybody who's ever had to do even some minor repair to their car knows that if you go online, you can find a YouTube video that'll tell you how to do just about everything on your car. So these are the kinds of things. So there's other ways to educate yourself besides university. And I'm not just saying that the internet is the place. Now, some of the greatest pieces of literature and writing that I've ever read was just out of books, you know, old books, new books. I mean, so there's a lot of ways to pursue education. And of course, reading something or hearing something is not knowledge. What you're hearing is what is being fed to you. How you apply what you read and what you hear and what you're told and what you're told to believe, how you apply that to your own life experiences. So, I mean, you know, you can watch the video on how to change the headlight in your car, but until you actually say, okay, I watched the video, now I'm going to go change the headlight. It's not until you change the headlight in your car that you know how to do it. Watching the video itself didn't do it. And so the same thing can be said for anything that you're doing, whether it's, you know, childcare or anything else. So, you know, as I go forward with some of these other issues, I want you to understand that when I say education, I'm not just talking about, you know, being educated by a white professor in a university or a brown professor in a university. I'm using education and the pursuit of wisdom and knowledge together, and we can parse out what that pursuit of education really looks like. Now, one of the other areas, and what I was advised as as an 18-year-old, 17-year-old, was to pursue education for self fulfillment, to become more knowledgeable, to become a wisdom keeper, if you will. To pursue knowledge, not just education. That's what that's one of the things that I was advised, and I'm not saying that I always took that advice directly, but it's always something that's hung with me. So when I think about the things that I've experienced in my life and the education that I gained from those experiences, and I mean from everything, from from traveling, from doing prison time, from doing time at universities and in various job experiences. These are the areas that you gain incredible amounts of education. And of course, when you are working or you're earning a living, whatever shape that takes, your interaction with people. I mean, I've met some incredible people over the years in job related and work related experiences and gatherings and that kind of stuff. So when you talk about education for self-fulfillment, there are many reasons to pursue an education to broaden your horizons. And and of course, here we're talking about things like literature or art, but even science and philosophy. I mean, I'm not talking about doing this stuff and learning pursuing some of these areas for career. I'm saying just to be more worldly and more understanding of what's happening. And again, not even for security, as I mentioned earlier. So to pursue philosophy, even religions, to understand what are the religious beliefs of other people, and then not try to turn them into cartoons. Oftentimes we hear people, especially if they're looking at somebody else's religion, if they have a religion they think is the right one, they can find all of the flaws in somebody else's belief system and try to create almost a cartoon version of what somebody else's beliefs are. I mean, from a Native standpoint, how many times have we heard people try to break down Native people's viewpoints as the gods of this and the gods of that, and oh yeah, they believe in this and they believe in that, without understanding what is the foundation of using language and metaphor, not because we believe that the moon is really the face of or the head of our grandmother, but that we have reverence for that moon as if she were our grandmother. So I mean, these are the so there are ways of understanding and learning about other cultures, and then and making sure that you take a deeper look into those cultures, so you understand what is the foundation. I mean, why do Christians believe what they believe? Why do Jews believe what they believe? Why do Muslims believe what they believe? And what is the foundation of that belief? I mean, even things like heaven and hell and all of the good and evil. Where did that construct come from? I think those things are interesting, but I also think that they can teach you about yourself and about how you interact with other people. So again, that is more about broadening your horizons. And of course, and I said it, art and history, experimentation. I mean, what you learn from doing is an incredible, that is probably the greatest life lesson, whether it's experimenting in the kitchen or whether it's in the backyard. I mean, whether it's building something or taking something apart to figure out how something works. I mean, all of that hands-on experimentation is the kind of thing that you can do to fulfill your curiosity and to grow your knowledge base, but also understanding your own culture, learning more about your own history and your culture, learning your language and the origins, and not just how to do table talk, but why do the words mean what they mean. These are the kinds of things that you can do to pursue personal fulfillment. Hey, look, we're at the bottom of the hour, so let me take a break. When we come back, I'm going to talk about the obvious reason that people think you should pursue education, which is for a career. And we'll talk about that a little bit and what that really means. But we'll talk about that when we come back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native.
She works down in that coffee shop, the busiest street of a murder town. And she knows just what she wants, with a smile with the now long days got her down. If the bright lights stop blinding me, looks like we're in for a ride, yeah. And you can always confide in me, and darling, just hold on tight, yeah. There ain't no turning back, and there ain't no running home, and there ain't no turning back. Just can't stand the thought of another man. And there ain't no running home, and there ain't no turning back, and there ain't no running home. Just can't stand the thought of another man. The curtains close, the dust is settled down. Sound much too big for this little town. The tip of my tongue, you can hear my sound. The top of my lungs, you just watch me drown. Oh, if the bright lights stop blinding me, looks like we're in for a ride. You can always confide in me, and I can just hold on tight, yeah. So go ahead, love, and make my heart go off the deep end. I'll be free for the weekend. Pick up the pieces and pretend.
All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Again, we're talking about education, but before I get back into it, let me give a shout-out to my sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises, good friends like Ed Schindler and Cynthia Trice and Neville Spring, Sugar Montour, and the Seneca Nation for making contributions from time to time and supporting the program. I also want to thank the others who have helped in the past, because that's how we got here. We were doing commercial radio, and we're paying a pretty hefty price for it. And we had plenty of people who had stepped up over the years to advertise and sponsor and donate, and it's allowed us to continue on. And now we're in our 8th year. So I want to thank all of you who've allowed me to continue to educate, entertain, and inform over the last 7.5 years. And I want to thank you for joining in the fight and doing your part. Look, I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache Radio Net for providing our streaming. I also want to thank CKWE for both the simulcast and the rebroadcast as well as well as Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, Indigenous Resistance Radio, all of you for carrying this our program on your networks. But I also want to thank all the folks who share the program, and not the least of which is my wife, who shares the program with a lot of other group pages, and it's part of the reason that it is real easy for people to access the information. Look, we do this kind of show, and we don't know how many people are tuning us in at any given time, and whether it's a handful at one sitting, or while we're live, or that it's people after the fact. We do this so the conversation is taking place, and it's part of part of my commitment to encouraging the conversation. And what we're talking about here is education. And education is important. Yeah, I mean, you cannot just, let your mind go stagnant. It's like a muscle, and you've got to work it. And, again, my good friend Decker Rundige, we talk about critical thinking, the idea of really asking the questions, try to learn more. I mean, the curiosity of a child is incredible. But oftentimes we can stifle that curiosity by giving them BS answers or pushing them off and that kind of stuff. And I think this is what we have to think more about doing. We have to encourage curiosity. We have to encourage creativity. But anyway, I want to, I've talked about education for security and for personal growth, which, I think a lot of these things still can overlap. But, most people pursue education and are encouraged to pursue education for career. So I call that survivability, because what you're being told to get educated for is so you can earn a living and take care of yourself and survive and thrive and be sustainable. Unfortunately, we can invest a lot of money and time and years and effort into pursuing a line of education that can be narrow. It can be, it could be the popular craze of the moment. So it gets overpopulated. A certain career field, whether it's, you look at the legal field or the medical field or whatever else. There's a lot of examples where people pursue a career and then they find themselves in an environment where there's a glut of people who've pursued the same education. So when you think about what you want to get educated for, career is one of those reasons. But is it career? Is it job? Is it money? Or is it quality of life? So, I mean, I think this ends up being one of those questions, and it's not a philosophical question. It's a genuine question, because I mean, there are ways that you can pursue things, education in your life, to try to make all the money you can. And hey, I remember even as Native people were first getting involved in some of the commerce that we've managed to sustain over the years, tobacco and some of the things that we've taken advantage of our tax advantages over. The thing is, we didn't think any of that stuff was going to last very long. We kind of had the attitude, make all the money you can while you can, so you can use that money as the means to another end, so to speak. And of course, then what happens in that you become consumed with pursuing that line of business or income generation that you've pursued. And so it kind of like becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. I mean, so you stand on sovereignty to defend a certain business, and then you have to use the resource from that business to turn around and defend sovereignty. I mean, it's that's kind of the way it works, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, I think about the areas that most people associate native commerce with, like gas, tobacco, and gaming. We have ourselves gained a tremendous amount of understanding and knowledge and wisdom, I guess, about how to navigate, the obstacles that get thrown at us, whether it's by the state or the federal government or by, other groups. So these are areas that the education isn't just about how to do a business, but how to defend a business. But when we talk about that kind of education to pursue career or job, are we really talking about career and job and money and status, or are we talking about quality of life? So this is where I think there's another conversation to be had, a conversation about looking at ways to gain wisdom and knowledge that allow you to improve the quality of life, whether it's tied directly to to income generation or not. And this is where there are a whole lot of other things that you can pursue. I mean, that may be may allow you to enjoy a much higher quality of life, even if it isn't a tremendous income generator. I mean, I look at the world that we live in, and when I was a child, I mean, I was talking to my buddy Ross the other day, and I got to think that even today, I mean, today when I think about how many of us had our parents, and not only my generation, but my father and my grandfather's generation were involved in the high steel industry, working construction, being iron workers, walking the steel, as they say. And I don't know that one guy earning, working so many weeks a year, so many hours a week can support a family in the way that that my father did and my father's generation did. And of course, that had its toll, because the likelihood is to follow that money and to follow that career, you had to leave your family. You left your family someplace. Your family was back home while you were traveling to New York or Boston or Detroit or Chicago. Some of our guys who traveled the globe, and they worked all over the world on some of these buildings, because they developed a skill set that had value, but that career that they chose was not necessarily conducive to a high quality of life in terms of a family relationship. A father who was interactive with his own kids. So when I think back to a previous time when a father could be the breadwinner or the income generator, and he could generate enough income on a 40-hour work week to support a whole family, that doesn't exist anymore. So when we think about quality of life, is it just about making more money? I mean, are we always going to gauge the quality of life by income generation? So, this is where education comes in, because if that's the only thing that we're geared towards, this is where when we talk about assimilation and indoctrination, we start following a path that a capitalist system has laid out for us, and we start deviating from every aspect of our cultural belief systems, our philosophies. Again, 7 generations. Because now it's about pursuing all the dollars you can while you can. It's about now instant gratification. It's not about sustainability, and it's not about intergenerational sustainability. So this is the challenge. So when we think about what we're pursuing education for and how we're pursuing that education, I mean, I bring this stuff back home because I think that where we live, and it kind of relates to one of my opening statements here. I mean, there's advantages to being who we are, but we squander those advantages when we don't utilize the fact that we have land and territory that we can do things that other people can't do in their territories. We aren't bound by the state and the federal government to the extent that others are with their pursuits. We have an opportunity to we can live a higher quality of life with a lower cost of living because of where we live. We don't pay taxes and that kind of thing. So how do we turn those things into not just something that we exploit and squander just so we can have more disposable income, but we use those things about being native, about being on a native territory, to create a model that others are going to look at and say, maybe we need to back out of some of the direction we've gone with this whole capitalism model that we're all following. And so I think this is part of what I think we need to do. But and again, I don't want to just talk about the education that we need to gain, because I think, and one of the comments here was, what about the education we need to provide? Because I think we have to take another look at what we're educating our children to, what we're educating others to. Part of the reason for me to do radio, for me to do any of this is because I think we do need to have share information. I think people do have to understand who we are as a people, and people do. And I think they have to understand what are our concerns, and as to not be taken advantage of. I think that we need to be much more diligent about how we how we represent ourselves to others. So, I mean, again, when we're talking about education, we do need to take a solid look at what we are providing to our children and to the people around us in terms of real education, and not get muddled. Again, but back to what my friend Paul says. We can be consumed with what's happening in the world elsewhere. Every conspiracy, that may or may not be real. But I mean, look, flying jets into the World Trade Center was a terrible thing, and it was pretty remarkable, and there's a lot of questions associated with it. But you know what? Those buildings weren't on our territories, and I'm not saying I don't care, but when I look at these acts of terrorism that are happening all over the world, including false flags and anything else anybody else wants to throw out there. What do we do to prevent ourselves from being victims of those things? So what do we do to secure our own, not just our territories? I don't mean building border walls and that kind of stuff. I mean, this is about mindset. This is about what we teach our kids. I mean, our kids are very vulnerable to suicide. And they're vulnerable to any number of missing and murdered Indigenous women, abductions, falling into criminal activity. I mean, getting locked up. I mean, these are things that we should be taking a stronger role in educating our children, because it isn't working to shipping them off to public school. And frankly, the few that will pursue higher education. And I've talked about this before. It's great to say, we got these three really bright kids in this community, and we're so proud of them. They went off to they're going off to Harvard and Dartmouth and Princeton, and they're going to become lawyers, and then we never see them again. They pursue their jobs and their careers in New York City, so we lose our best and our brightest. So what do we do to retain? What do we do to retain brain trust? And what do we do to retain and not just retain them to hold them back, but to provide the opportunities so our best and brightest can pursue endeavors here on our own territories? Because that's what's missing here. We aren't creating the environment where creativity, perhaps with arts, and I don't want to dismiss that, but in terms of creativity, in terms of economy, in terms of science and pursuit of science, and in terms of everything from rethinking about what a community is about, rethinking what healthcare is, rethinking what medicine is. We don't do any of that stuff here on our own territories. We delegate all that to the outside, and then we catch what drops off the table. And so our best and brightest don't have the opportunities on our own territories. And see, again, talking about how we educate the outside, I don't even think the outside can appreciate, these challenges. The fact that we have to come up with unique ways of figuring out, how to finance or fund everything from building a home to starting a business. We can't use the same model that's outside. So all that education outside there, all that means is that we've gained all of this, business degree that doesn't apply on our territories. In fact, we have a hard time taking proper inventory on what are the economic advantages of being on our territory, and then creating a whole nother school of business, a whole nother school of thought as it relates to business. Instead, we pursue everything that's out there. The standard model for what is business success. Develop an idea, a product or a service that is marketable beyond your region, and then hopefully has some global application, and then you grow it out to a certain point, and then you go public and you sell off most of your company to a public offering, and and you save just enough back so when you go public and the value of that stock goes up, you can get a second bite of the apple. This is what they teach you in business school. They don't teach you to build something that stays in your territory, that stays in your family. The whole idea of, John Kane and Sons, no, that doesn't exist anymore. Now it's you create, Nuco that you can take to a public offering, and it doesn't even matter if it's successful. You just have to sell an idea rather than implement. So this is what I'm talking about. The outside has no idea that that any of us are having this conversation, and part of it is because not enough of us are having this conversation. But we do have an obligation. We have an obligation to teach our children, but I think we have an obligation to teach the outside who we are and why we pursue distinction, and why it is that we feel the way we do about certain things. Well, I'm not just talking about mascot issues, but that too. Why we take offense to a Trump Pocahontas comment. Why are we concerned about what a governor's doing or a president's doing in this country or a prime minister in Canada and how it impacts us? But if we're not willing to share what our viewpoints are, then that's not serving us very well. That's not accomplishing anything for us. So I think this is part of the issue. Part of the issue is really about creating better dialogue, apply more critical thinking to everything from what education and the quest for knowledge is, and not just follow somebody else's path for it. I mean, the standard path. I mean, let's face it. The standard path is throw your kid into pre-K. Pre-K leads to kindergarten. Kindergarten leads to, graduation after 12th grade. Then you ship them off to university, without ever having an understanding of really pursuing. I mean, in our culture, what we would do is we would observe a child. We would observe an aptitude, not just how they score on a test, but really take the time to learn who your child is. And do everything you can to have your child be as expressive as they can, so you can see what the wants, desires, and aptitudes are. And those are the things that we should pursue. We're letting somebody else do that, and then somebody else is going to tell us how bright our kids are or how not bright they are. Or how many problems our children have. See, this is what we've got to change. This is really what we've got to change about education, about what we're doing to educate our own children, and about how we're responding to the to the world around us in terms of who we are and what we are. I mean, again, I know it comes down to identity. Who is it that we are? Are we who we used to be? And if we aren't, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Are we pursuing something that is going to maintain distinction as a people? I mean, I think about the things that we've adopted, membership rather than citizenship, blood quantum, reasons to keep people off of our enrollment. We do more to obliterate our population in the modern world than the federal government does. They've had their hand in it over the years, for sure. But today, Native people are doing more to undermine their survivability and their population and all that stuff. So I think these are some of the things that I just wanted to have this conversation. Look, I know I didn't provide anybody with some magic silver bullet, but I just think that we have to think about things a little bit differently in terms of what we're pursuing for education, whether it's for ourselves or for our children, or what we are broadcasting in terms of education, the education of others. I mean, I did Vincent Ello's radio show up in Niagara Falls. So leaving a native territory, leaving the normal listenership that I have in New York or here in Seneca territory, and going into some place like Niagara Falls, which people have some pretty diverse views about Native people because of this battle between the Senecas and the state, and of course the impact that it has on Buffalo, Niagara Falls, and Salamanca. So I had a different host asking me different kinds of questions, understanding that his viewpoint is different than mine. What he valued in terms of, and I'm talking about Vince, former mayor of Niagara Falls, what he valued in terms of what he wanted to see happen out of this relationship, Native Niagara Falls relationship. And then the callers called in. And so for me to educate those people about things that they just got wrong. I mean, I literally got into a pretty contentious conversation with somebody, explaining to them, look, it's simply illegal for the state of New York or Niagara Falls to impose a fee on the Seneca Nation simply because they're doing gaming. It's illegal. I mean, and I'm explaining this, and providing that education. Nobody's ever told these people this before. And if you don't explain this stuff, that's where the animosity can build up, and where they can think about something, whether it's not fair or whether somebody's being cheated or screwed somehow. And I think people came away from that 2-hour radio interview, maybe not agreeing with me and maybe not happy with some of the things that I said, but certainly understanding that perhaps some of what they thought isn't so. I mean, there's as Vince Anello calls the coffee shop, conversations, what people express as their wants and desires and their knowledge in the coffee shop, which may or may not be based on anything factual. I mean, that's kind of what we see in the national discourse with the current president, or even at the state level with the current governor, where things are said that are just factually not true. And so opinions that are being expressed, and those opinions are being interpreted as facts. I mean, when Andrew Cuomo says the Senecas have a history of breaking agreements, I mean, somebody can hear that and say, yeah, that's true. They do have a history. No, they don't. No, they don't. And so when you hear, the governor of the state of New York saying something like this, or then you hear somebody like, the president of the United States saying things that are just factually wrong. And we just let it go on, and we just allow it. So anyway, again, a different kind of show today, I realize. But I did want to talk about this subject, and perhaps this conversation can lead to some others, and we'll break off some piece of this, for other shows as the future comes upon us. But I think there is more conversation that needs to be had about education, what we apply for, what we pursue in terms of knowledge, and what we provide in terms of insight and knowledge to others. So that's what I want to talk about today. So I want to thank. Hey, look, not going to New York this week. I'm going to do my Let's Talk with John Kane show from my studios here in Cattaraugus. So it will still be Facebook live streamed on my Let's Talk with John Kane group page, and of course I'll share it around. So we'll still do a show. I'll still do the New York show. I just won't do it from New York. I'll just do it from here. So we'll do that on Thursday from 10 till noon, and then of course we'll be back here on Friday. So I want to thank you for listening. Thank you for all your comments. I know we did have a little bit of a sketchy Facebook live stream, and so hopefully what we can post up on YouTube will clean some of that up. But certainly the audio is going to be all there. When I post the SoundCloud links, anybody who wants to hear more of this conversation, I encourage you to check out the SoundCloud links that I'll post up on my group pages, and you'll have great audio, uninterrupted, which may be unlike what you saw on Facebook tonight. So thanks. We'll see you in a couple of days. Yahweh.
How many years must this go on? How many children in the classroom. English history.